Greetings and salutations, this is B. Harper from supermarcy.com and welcome back to another video. Day 2 of my cold and day 3 of my 32 favourite things. So today I'm going to give my inconsequential and arguably trivial thoughts on the director, Brian De Palma. Now, Brian De Palma is definitely a polarizing director, to say the least. You have a wide fan base of people who have seen quite a lot of these movies and have enjoyed them on their own merits. And then you have his detractors who say that he's little more than a rip-off artist of Alfred Hitchcock. To me, however, I find that these charges leveled against him actually work more in his favour rather than to his detriment. I'll explain why. So, De Palma has gone on the record and saying the reason why he idolizes Hitchcock is because Hitchcock's films are, according to him, the grammar of cinema. And when he puts it like that, you can see why he makes the choices that he makes when he makes his own films. For example, one of my favourite Brian De Palma films is Body Double. Granted, it's not as polished as, say, Dressed to Kill or Carrie, or, particularly epic in the sense that, Scarface was. But Body Double was more or less Brian De Palma at being his most casual and arguably his most fun-loving. He felt particularly loose in his motifs. And in Body Double, it deals a lot with the concepts of identity, or rather mistaken identity, as well as mental and physical afflictions. You also have topics that have caused controversy throughout films for a very long time, such as breaking taboos and the exploration of the dangers of sex and social pressure and personal fear of inadequacy or not being in control of a situation. And truth be told, I feel that Brian De Palma's work is a masterclass in its own self. Now, I am not saying that Brian De Palma is a better talent than Alfred Hitchcock was. Hitchcock was Hitchcock. And same so can be said for Brian De Palma. Brian De Palma's most famous works were made roundabout in the late 70s to early 80s, and they were reflections of how life was at the time, as is quite a few other films out there. People tend to say that films tend to show their date, but that's an attractive concept to me, because you get to have a little time capsule and a little glimpse way back in time before you were born, maybe in some cases, to see just how different yet the same the world was, or rather, pop culture. So going back to De Palma's whole style, I feel that his admiration of Hitchcock translates incredibly well into the more contemporary situations. With a film like Dressed to Kill, that is incredibly Hitchcockian. You could, if you were to take out the more suggestive elements of sex and nudity and that sort of thing, and more or less concentrated on the psychological concepts in the movie, that is an Alfred Hitchcock film. There's no two ways about it. If you take away, the more sensationalistic stuff, such as the bad human form, profanity, and all sorts of other vices such as drugs and alcohol use, being used in excess, you will still get at its core a Hitchcock film, and that goes for quite a lot of De Palma's work. I would have to say though that Carrie is perhaps his least Hitchcockian homage. There are still a couple of aesthetic references, but that movie is undoubtedly more of an adaptation of Stephen King. And Stephen King himself is not what you'd call a Hitchcockian sort of author. But that's a completely different kettle of fish, and I won't go into that. But just so, Brian De Palma is able to really capture your mind by preying and manipulating your emotions. Preying on your emotions and manipulating how you feel towards a film. There are a couple of other directors who are very accomplished at doing that. One of them being Paul Verhoeven. Paul Verhoeven is a master at aiming your senses in every one of his films. You can say what you like about their quality, but the stuff he flings up on screen, however bombastic and fantastic it still has the power to drive you. It still has the power to manipulate and bend you and shape you to, how the movie wants you to be. That's how suggestive, or rather, that's how open to suggestion the human mind is. And you don't need a sociologist to tell you that. We are faced with all sorts of wonderfully weird and ridiculous things every day, and we can either take them as a grain of salt, or we can wholeheartedly believe them because it falls into a camp that we feel more comfortable with. So long as we feel we can accept something, it's less of a threat. So with what De Palma does in his work is that although he really does, revel in the excesses that he shows us, that there's still substance to them. And a lot of this substance comes back to the human need to, be aroused. I don't just mean sexually. The human mind is a very complex entity, and given how much action it sees and how much it works and how much it has to contend with by controlling the rest of the human body and sending and receiving multiple messages every day and keeping your body alive, the brain is a remarkable piece of engineering. It's not flawless, but the human mind is perhaps one of the more... Oh, this is going to sound terrible. I feel the human mind is superior in some ways, but still remains inferior in others. I mean, when we talk about inferiority, you just need to look at some of the more fundamentalist individuals out there. I'm not denoting any religion in the interest of good taste, and I don't believe in grossly general terms, but just for the sake of what I'm saying, I feel it applies to us in a very sort of overreaching basis. So in terms of how I personally feel about Brian De Palma, I think he's one of the best people out there. He knows how to get his audience, and he knows what his audiences want. But at the same time, he is not content to just let us have what we want. We have to accept the stuff that he puts forth, the stuff that gives him satisfaction, that gives him, the power over us. That's one of the best things a director can do. That if a director and actors and writers are able to, control how you feel at any given time, that's half of what makes really good art. Art is partly how the artist indicates. The other half is how the audience takes it. It's a very sort of strange dynamic, but if it works, it works. Now, you may be wondering why I haven't gone into massively analytical detail about the Brian De Palma's movies. Well, that's simply because I don't have the time, and my brain hurts. But also, I find that if I talk more about Brian De Palma and how his work is so rich and varied, it may promote you to go out and see his films for yourself. If I may be perfectly frank, his 2002 film, Femme Fatale, with Rebecca Romijn and Antonio Banderas, is sorely underrated. Is it, fantastic? Not really. Brian De Palma has gotten older, okay? He's not the man he used to be, but if you can look past that general concept, you will see that Femme Fatale is smarter than it initially appears. And I've got to say, the twists and turns in that movie, that is so Alfred Hitchcock. And I mean that as a genuine compliment. So, in closing, Brian De Palma is one of my favourite directors just because he is able to take my brain and, do whatever he wants with it. He can have his way with my emotions and, with my feelings. He is able to perfectly control me any which way. I am his puppet, he is my master. So, yes, and that's why I like Brian De Palma. So if my rambling bullshit has in any way made you curious about his films, please do check them out. But don't expect brilliance from The Black Dahlia, because that movie really sucks. Okay guys, well, I shall be chatting with you very, very shortly. And you have a really good day, or night, or afternoon. I'm just rambling now. See you later. Bye bye.